Late at night, the corporate building was almost silent, except for the faint sound of a mop swishing across the marble floor. Ethan, a single father and the building's night janitor, worked steadily, humming a gentle tune under his breath. His eyes wandered for a moment toward the grand hall, where staff were preparing for the CEO's upcoming charity gala. In the center of the glittering room stood a glossy black piano, its surface reflecting the warm light of the chandeliers. Ethan paused, gazing at it with a mix of longing and nostalgia. It had been years since his hands touched real piano keys, years since music had been more than a memory. He sighed and went back to work, but a small group of young executives setting up for the event had noticed his glance. One of them smirked and called out, "Hey, janitor, why don't you give us a show?" The others chuckled, expecting an awkward, clumsy moment they could laugh about later. Ethan froze, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. Part of him wanted to ignore them and keep mopping, but something inside urged him forward. He slowly walked to the piano, each step echoing in the vast hall. Sitting down, he rested his fingers lightly on the keys, unsure if they would remember what to do. Then, almost without thinking, he began to play. The first notes were soft, trembling, but within seconds, they grew strong, rich, and heartbreakingly beautiful. Conversations faded. The smirks disappeared. The melody filled the air like a living thing, wrapping the room in warmth and sorrow. Even the laughter that had lingered in the corners was gone, replaced by a silence so deep, it felt sacred. Nobody expected a janitor to play like this. And Ethan knew they were hearing not just music, but his story. The music flowed from Ethan's fingers like water from a hidden spring, each note carrying years of unspoken emotions. His eyes closed as the melody deepened, weaving a story of love, loss, and quiet resilience. The young executives, who moments earlier had been ready to laugh, now stood frozen. One of them slowly lowered his drink, eyes fixed on the man they had underestimated. In that moment, Ethan wasn't a janitor in worn work shoes, he was a man who had lived, who had sacrificed, who had once been someone else entirely. The sound was warm and aching, the kind that made you think of people you'd lost and dreams you'd almost forgotten. A middle-aged woman in a sequin dress, one of the event planners, whispered to the person beside her, "I think he used to be a concert pianist." The words rippled quietly through the group, and suddenly, they saw him differently. They saw the faint scars of hard years in his posture, the quiet dignity in his movements. What they didn't know was that Ethan had once filled grand theaters with this same music. But when his wife passed away, leaving him with a 5-year-old daughter, the tours, fame, and late-night encores didn't matter anymore. He traded it all for a steady job, a small apartment, and the chance to be there every single night to tuck her in. As his hands moved effortlessly across the keys, the memories washed over him. The song he played wasn't just a piece of music, it was the one he had written for his late wife, a lullaby of love and goodbye. And though he hadn't meant to, he was letting everyone in the room hear the most vulnerable part of himself. The melody rose, filling every corner of the hall with a raw, aching beauty that seemed to still time itself. The chandeliers shimmered softly as if they too were listening. Ethan's fingers moved with a confidence that came not from arrogance, but from years of loving the music as if it were part of his soul. The CEO, who had just arrived at the back of the room to check on the event preparations, stopped mid-step. He was a man used to numbers, deals, and polished speeches, but now he found himself rooted in place, caught in the invisible net of Ethan's music. Something about the way each note lingered carried the weight of a lifetime. By now, the young executives who had mocked him stood silent, their earlier smirks replaced with something almost like shame. One of them swallowed hard, realizing they had turned a moment meant for ridicule into something sacred. Ethan didn't see them. His mind was far away, in a small, sunlit living room where his wife used to sit by the window, eyes closed, listening to him play. He remembered the way her hand would rest on the piano, feeling the vibrations of each note, as if she were holding the music itself. He remembered the night she was gone, and how the silence afterward felt heavier than any sound he could ever make. But tonight, in this grand hall, he let himself feel it all, the joy, the grief, the love. And with every chord, he gave a piece of it away. The final notes of the song hovered in the air like a prayer, refusing to fade, leaving everyone who heard them just a little different than before. When the last note finally melted into silence, no one moved. It was as if the entire room had forgotten how to breathe. Then, slowly, the sound of hands coming together broke the stillness, not polite applause, but a standing ovation that rose like a wave. Ethan opened his eyes, startled, his hands still resting on the keys. He wasn't used to being seen anymore, let alone celebrated. The CEO stepped forward through the crowd, his eyes glassy, and extended his hand. That, he said, his voice low but firm, was the most moving thing I've heard in my life. For a moment, Ethan didn't know how to respond. The CEO continued, "You've been here all this time, and I never knew we had this kind of greatness in our own halls." Around them, guests nodded, some wiping their eyes. The same young executives who had laughed now avoided Ethan's gaze, their faces flushed with guilt. The CEO placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden behind a mop and bucket. I want you to be part of our company's arts outreach program. We'll make sure your music reaches people who need it, and your daughter will have a scholarship to any school she dreams of." Ethan blinked, trying to process the words. It felt unreal, as if this was some dream he might wake from. But the warmth in the CEO's tone and the sincerity in the crowd's faces told him it was real. In that moment, the humiliation meant to belittle him had turned into an opportunity that could change his life forever, all because he had dared to sit down and play. Ethan left the building that night with his mop still in the janitor's closet and a folded letter of opportunity in his pocket. The air outside was cool, the city lights shimmering like 1,000 tiny promises. He walked slowly, almost afraid the magic of the evening would vanish if he hurried. As he turned the corner toward his small apartment, he could already picture his daughter's face when he told her. She had grown up watching him work long nights, never knowing the full story of the music he once played. Soon, she would. Soon, she would hear him not as Dad the janitor, but as the man who had poured his soul into a song for her mother, and into every dream he'd kept alive for her. Inside their apartment, she was still awake, curled up on the couch with a blanket, waiting for him. "You're home late," she said with a sleepy smile. Ethan sat beside her and pulled her close, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Sweetheart, I think our lives just changed tonight." She looked up, curious, but before he could explain, she noticed the shimmer in his eyes and hugged him tighter. In that quiet, simple moment, Ethan realized something: the music had always been his gift, but love. His love for her, had been the true masterpiece all along. And as they sat together in the soft glow of the lamp, he felt certain of one thing: sometimes the world only needs to hear your song once to remember it forever.